When you think of the books of the Bible, you probably picture these ancient, serious, maybe even a little stuffy texts. But what if I told you one of the most important books isn't really a book at all? It's a fiery, passionate, and, let's be honest, an angry letter written right in the middle of a crisis. This is the story of Galatians. And it's not just ancient history. It's a raw defense of freedom, written when everything was on the line. So this is how the Apostle Paul kicks off his letter to the churches in Galatia. No dear friends, no hope you're doing well, just boom, straight into I am astonished. You can feel the betrayal just jumping off the page. He's not just a little disappointed, he is absolutely floored.
I mean, you've got to ask yourself, what on earth could make an apostle start a letter like that? What could have happened in these brand new churches to get such a white-hot response? Well, that's the mystery we're about to unpack.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the shocking betrayal that lit the fuse, then the public trial of the gospel itself. We'll dive into Paul's revolutionary idea of how we get right with God, see how that creates one new family, explore the kind of freedom that actually transforms you, and finally land on the ultimate goal, a whole new creation. See, to really get Paul's anger, you have to understand these churches in Galatia weren't just dots on a map for him. He had personally started them. These were non-Jewish people, Gentiles, who had completely turned their lives around for Jesus. Paul saw them as his kids, and now he gets a message that they're walking away from the very thing that saved them. It was deeply, painfully personal. And the Greek word Paul uses here for deserting, wow, it's metathetomai. Now, this isn't just a word for, changing your mind. This is a military term. It means you're a soldier who has gone AWOL, deserted your post, and joined the enemy army. For Paul, this wasn't some theological disagreement. This was treason. So, who was this enemy? Well, after Paul left, this group of teachers showed up, and they were smooth. Their message sounded so spiritual. They said, hey, believing in Jesus is great. It's a good start, but it's not enough. If you really want to be part of God's people, you also need to get circumcised, follow our food laws, and observe the Sabbath. And this is why Paul is losing his mind. When he calls their message a different gospel, the Greek word he uses is heteros. That doesn't mean a different brand of the same product. It means something of a completely different kind. It's a counterfeit. Paul is basically shouting, what they're selling you isn't another version of the good news. It's not the good news at all. So as you can imagine, this whole thing just blew up. It went way beyond a little church squabble and turned into a full-blown public trial, with the gospel itself in the courtroom. See, these agitators were clever. They knew they had to fight a war on two fronts. First, they attacked the message. Jesus isn't quite enough. But then they attacked the messenger. And who is this Paul guy anyway? He wasn't one of the original 12 apostles. He's got a second-hand, watered-down gospel. This meant Paul had to defend not just what he was teaching, but who he was. And this all comes to a head in one of the most jaw-dropping scenes in the entire New Testament. Paul tells this story about being in Antioch. Peter, the Apostle Peter, is there, and he's hanging out, eating with the non-Jewish Christians. It's a beautiful picture of unity. But then, a group arrives from Jerusalem, guys who are all about that Jesus plus circumcision message. And Peter, the rock, buckles under the pressure. He pulls back and separates himself from the non-Jews. Paul sees this happen, and he is having none of it. He sees this not as a simple social mistake, but as a public betrayal of the gospel's truth. So right there, in front of everybody, he confronts Peter to his face and calls him a hypocrite. Can you just imagine the tension in that room? For Paul, this wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about the very heart of the gospel being compromised. So this public showdown forces Paul to lay all his cards on the table. He has to explain, right then and there, the core of his message. And it all boils down to one of the biggest questions of all time. How can anyone be made right with God? Okay, there's a big theological word here, dikaiosine, or justification. Now, we tend to think of this like a courtroom. The judge bangs a gavel and declares you not guilty. But for Paul, it was so much more than that. It meant being declared to be in a right relationship with God, yeah, but it also meant you were being formally welcomed as a full-fledged member of his family. So how does that happen? Paul draws a line in the sand. On one side, you have the works of the law, which for him meant the specific markers like circumcision and food laws that separated Jews from everyone else. On the other side, you have the faith of the Messiah. The whole point is, it's not about what you do for God. It's about trusting what God in Jesus has already done for you. And this leads to his ultimate point, and it is a mind-bender. Paul says that when you trust in Jesus, your old identity, the one that was always trying to prove itself, it dies. It's crucified with him. And in its place, the actual living Messiah comes to live in you. Your identity is no longer based on your performance, but on his life.
Now, a truth that big doesn't just stay in your head. It's not an abstract idea. It's a social earthquake. It completely shakes up the world and changes everything about who belongs and why. Okay, but wait a second. You're probably thinking what the Galatians were thinking. Paul, if faith is the whole deal now, then what was the point of God giving the law to Moses on Mount Sinai? Was that all just a waste of time?
Paul's answer is absolutely brilliant. He says the law had a couple of really important but temporary jobs. First, it was like a magnifying glass. It showed everyone their own sinfulness and just how much they needed a savior. Second, it acted like a pedagogos, which was a strict slave guardian who looked after a child. It kept Israel in line until the Messiah came. But, and this is the key, it was never meant to be the final plan.
Because once the Messiah arrived, the entire game changed. And Paul drops what might be the single most revolutionary bombshell in the letter. He says that in Jesus, all the old dividing lines that define the entire world, ethnicity, social status, gender, they're gone. They're obsolete. In this new family, there is only one status that matters. You are one in the Messiah.
All right, so the logical next question is pretty obvious, right? If all the old rules and laws are set aside, what's to stop total chaos? Won't people just go nuts and do whatever they want? It's a fair point, and Paul dives right in. Paul just flips the whole idea of freedom on its head. He says this isn't freedom to indulge every selfish impulse you have. Come on, that's just another kind of slavery. No, this is freedom from the power of sin that messes us up so that you are finally free to become the person you were made to be, someone who can truly love God and love others. And he lays out these two paths. You can live by the old self, which produces the works of the flesh, all the stuff that tears people and communities apart, or you can live by the Spirit, which produces fruit. And this fruit isn't just you trying to be a better person. It's the actual character of Jesus himself. Love, joy, peace, patience, growing in your life. But, and this is a huge but, this isn't magic. It's not automatic. Paul says you have to cultivate this fruit. It takes intentionally keeping in step with the Spirit. You have to learn to listen, to follow his lead. It's a partnership, a dance. And all of this brings us to Paul's grand finale. The whole argument about circumcision, the food laws, it was all missing the bigger picture. God's goal isn't just to get people to follow a different set of rules. It's way, way bigger than that. I love this detail. At the very end of the letter, Paul apparently takes the pen from his scribe and writes the last few lines himself in big, bold letters. He wants to make absolutely sure they don't miss his final point. He's shouting it from the page. And here it is, the mic drop moment of the entire letter. All those religious badges and identity markers you're fighting over, they mean nothing. They're obsolete. What matters? The only thing that matters is a new creation. The gospel isn't about tweaking your behavior. It's about God creating a brand new humanity, a new family powered by his Spirit to love. And that's where he leaves them and where he leaves us. It forces us to ask a pretty radical question today. If our true identity, if our real belonging has nothing to do with what we achieve or our background or our status, but it's all based on being part of this new creation, how does that completely change the way we see ourselves and how we see every single person around us?